Hello and a very warm welcome. My name is Guntram Wolff and I'm the director of Bruegel, and I'm honored and pleased today to host a debate with the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, on the topic from playing field to player, Europe's strategic autonomy as our generation's goal. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for joining us for this debate. Today, the plan of today's debate is first to hear your keynote speech, and following your keynote speech, there will be time for us to engage in a debate, but of course also for you in the audience to join us in this debate and ask your questions. For that, you need to go on the website slido, sli.do, and type in the word autonomy, and then you can ask your questions, and I will see some of your questions, the questions here on my smartphone, and pick some of those, not all of them, but some of those, and post them to the President. Without much further ado, let me thank you again, and I look forward to your keynote speech.
Thank you. Cher
Guntram Wolff, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and privilege for me to speak to you today, thanks to the Bruegel Institute. Your contribution to the European debate have had a real impact, and having an impact is today's topic when we're talking about Europe's strategic autonomy, sovereignty and power. We know that these concepts and words can have different connotations here and there, but today I would like to concentrate on the substance, even if I'd like to avoid a recurrent accusation that autonomy is protectionism. It's not. I think it's the opposite, and I'd like to show that. Everyone will remember Paul-Henri Spaak, who said that there's only two types of state in Europe, the small and those who do not yet know that they are small. And this saying by Paul-Henri Spaak inspires me to say that Europe is big, but it doesn't yet know that it's big. The last 3 decades of Europe's construction have shown the creation of the single market, the Schengen area, the euro, and the Big Bang enlargement, and the Lisbon Treaty, which has consolidated our institutional framework. Each of these steps strengthened the European Union and its autonomy. Each of these steps have led to our market and our area becoming a major world player. And we've seen the Brussels effect, well described in his book by Anu Bradford, the Brussels effect. And that is not about bureaucracy, which is so often decried by people. It's, in fact, the capacity that we have to actually distribute our standards around the world. Now, in Molière, Monsieur Jourdan speaks in prose without knowing it. Now, perhaps Europeans have also become a power, a world power, without actually being aware of it. Now, as an example, let's mention our climate diplomacy. We, Europeans, are on the avant-garde in the fight against global warming. In 2018, there were a few pioneering countries who committed themselves to the idea of carbon neutrality by 2050. After that, we tried to convince others and mobilize civil society and young people for the climate. And in December 2019, Ursula von der Leyen supported the idea of a Green Deal, and 27 member states committed to the idea of 2050 right across the European Union for this objective. And we have got this message to China, including during our most recent virtual summit with President Xi. And last week, President Xi said that China was committing to 2060 as well for climate neutrality. And that, I think, is a real success of our diplomacy. We need, of course, to be vigilant that these commitments are kept to and implemented, but it's a step in the right direction. So, ladies and gentlemen, why is it that we need to choose strategic autonomy in Europe. Why is it so essential? Well, because the globalized world has really changed since the end of the Cold War, and also because we've seen some instability being developed all around us. In the East, the natural extension of Europe's democracy was brutally stopped in Ukraine. Russia saw a major geopolitical threat there in Ukraine and took part of Ukraine's territory. And there's a war in the east of the country which is destabilizing it and the whole region. And recent events in Belarus, even if it's a different context, once again show the challenges that we face at Europe's eastern borders. In the eastern Mediterranean, we're seeing tensions, and in Libya, Syria, for example, there's a great deal of instability, and pressure is being put on Greece and Cyprus' sovereignty, and our relationship with Turkey is being strongly tested. And at the next European summit, we will be focusing on adopting a European strategic position for that region. And I proposed a multilateral conference where we would look at the maritime borders, energy, security and migration, and economic cooperation, for example. In the south of Europe, to the south of Europe rather, there's Africa. And we see in Africa just how much things are changing and will continue to change. Energy, we're seeing that we could see new alliances being formed in Africa. That'll depend on us and on African leaders as well, and I'm hoping to be able to work intensively to transform our alliance with Africa and move forward in optimistic and positive ways. Now, to the West, Brexit. Now we have to recognize the referendum, and the result of that has really been something that has shaken the European Union. Now, we see that some saw the Brexit referendum result as a failure of the European project. And where are we today? Well, the United Kingdom is seeing the EU having joined forces. Now, the British have a dilemma to face. What sort of society do they want for themselves? Do they prefer to maintain high quality and health food standards, for example, environmental standards, or do they want to see some sort of race to the bottom with their standards, which will mean they'll end up engaging in unfair competition with some and be facing unfair competition from other areas of the world? And I think the answer to those questions will determine what sort of access the British have to the European market. Now, when it comes to our alliances with the United States, over and beyond the history and shared values which weld us together, we're seeing choices being made in the US, geopolitical choices which go against the interests of the European Union. They withdrew from the climate accords and also the Iranian nuclear agreement, and we're seeing a growth in protectionism. And those aren't just details. We want to remain a solid and loyal ally of the United States, and we hope that that feeling is mutual. Now, moving on to China. We are committed to meet global challenges such as COVID-19 and climate change with China. But when it comes to trade and the economy, we think we need to rebalance our relationship. We want more of a level playing field. We want more reciprocity. And when it comes to human rights, we don't want to look away. And we want to promote our own values. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the supposed weakness of Europe which has meant it faces challenges now. It's because Europe is one of the world's premier strategic powers that it sees itself faced with these challenges. But when Europe seemed too soft or too weak, it wasn't because others were stronger. It's often because we have underestimated our own capacity to bring influence to bear. Europe sometimes has this rather unfortunate habit to be its own whipping boy and to criticize itself when it actually is more robust than it thinks. And we, of course, can have debates, but we need to reach decisions too. We should be proud of the fact we're not North Korea. We are a collection of democracies who have public debates which guarantee the legitimacy of our decisions. And it's this capacity to surmount our differences, to focus on our objectives. We've shown that in our fight of COVID-19, which I think has created a momentum which we've been able to capitalize on. The billions of euros that we mobilized, those are the fuel for our resilience and also our environmental and digital transformation. And it's these decisions which will be seen later as a key moment in Europe's history. We are capable to mobilize when we face our own challenges, but I think we need to also be able to act not just internally but externally. I think our strategic autonomy should focus on three goals. The first is stability and security. The second is to transmit our standards elsewhere, and the third is to transmit our values. Now, of course, security relates to physical security, peace, but also the environment as well. Air and water, biodiversity, respecting the planet and species. And then there's, of course, economic security and social security as well. This means we need to have a good setting which promotes trade and economic development. We should be defending fair markets and reciprocity with our trade partners. That's one of our priorities as well. Now, we want to have free and open economies, and we're against the idea of protectionism in any form. And access to our market cannot be sold or auctioned off. The less you respect our standards, the less you'll have access to them, whether you leave our union or whether you want to come closer to it. Now, we also need to make sure we have security of our strategic supplies. Now, when it comes to COVID, of course, we need to have a secure supply of medical supplies, but it also applies to other things such as rare earths or supplies which are very important to our digital transformation as well. Now, stability is also to do with making sure that our migration policies are dignified and ordered. And that's a question which is going to take a lot of our time in the weeks to come. Now, our second objective is to preserve our ability to fix standards, to set standards. Now, this capacity is a real form of our European power. It's our standards when it comes to the use of chemicals, which assure that toys made all around the world are safe. It's our general regulation on data protection which has set the world data protection standard on the internet, and it's our definitions and our aims to want to get rid of hate speech, which has led to the major social media platforms to take action to do that. And we've seen how Europe can win the battle of ideas, therefore, and win the battle of standards. We were pioneers of environmental technology, and by fixing standards in that sector, we actually achieve a double result. Firstly, we're taking leadership in that area, and also we're contributing towards fighting climate change. And I think this illustrates our third objective, the strength of our economic and social model, which is based on our own shared values, quite uniquely in the world. And it's this which makes us so attractive to a number of partners around the world. And it's the fact that we build on this foundation, which means we need to share our values to make the world safer and more fair, and to use it to fight climate change and defending fair trade rules. That will help us to create a fairer world, and it's in our interest, but also in the interest, it's in the universal interest of all. So, ladies and gentlemen, we do have solid instruments at our disposal, and we should use them more and use them better. Of course, there are financial levers and resources, as we've seen with the relaunch plan, and we also have competences. The European Union, if it judiciously uses its trade agreements, its economic governance, its supervision of the financial markets, and its industrial, spatial, and digital policies, as well as using the euro, all of these are levers we can use. And we need, of course, to bear in mind that there is progress that we can make on how to coordinate using these instruments to benefit our international strategies. Josep Borrell, our High Representative, is an excellent foreign minister, and that really is the letter and the spirit of the Lisbon Treaty. He's fully committed to use his experience, his skills, and as the Vice President of the European Commission and President of the Foreign Affairs Council, he has all of the political space he needs to defend our shared values. Now, this isn't an easy task because unanimity is needed when it comes to foreign policy decisions, and it's this unanimity, and we know this question of unanimity is questioned and debated quite often, and I'd like to share with you my point of view here. Now, of course, sometimes the need for unanimity slows down decision-making and makes it sometimes impossible, but it's this requirement which means that we always need to do everything we can to bring member states together around the table, and it's this European unity which is also our strength. Unanimity helps the 27 member states to reach a decision that they can stand by. So I think moving away from unanimity could risk being a false economy or a false good idea. Are there not other ways that we could move forward on the international stage without losing the added value of our unanimity? Now, my very modest experience here is in the recent months, what I've seen is that diverging points of view, which seemed major, could quite quickly be ironed out after a thorough debate. We saw that on China. Our preparatory discussions allowed us to draw together a common position which seemed to be one that member states could all share. And I'm sure that that will also be true for Belarus and the Eastern Mediterranean. I also am optimistic that there too we can express shared positions which I think will be given more strength because they are unanimous. Now, the major decisions that we have taken on the budget or on the recovery fund show once again that when we have robust exchange of views, that's an indispensable step in the democratic process. And it's on that basis that our decisions have their legitimacy, because we've discussed properly. Now, it's I think also personal respect and trust that are very important as well. And that's why I would like to encourage even our informal interactions to take place between Europe's leaders. Unity isn't spontaneous. It needs effort, it needs tenacity, and it needs goodwill to be maintained. So, ladies and gentlemen, defense is not a European competence like all the others, and I know there are all kinds of national sensitivities about defense. I think that deepening European defense is something that's really necessary, and we need to move away from our ideological sensitivities. Now, it's something which will need to be developed in time, in strategic partnerships with NATO, and we've just given 7 billion euros to the European Defence Fund, which is very much in line with this strategy. And I'd like to also pay tribute to Federica Mogherini and Jean-Claude Juncker for their strategic thinking here. Ladies and gentlemen, the European Union is by its very essence a positive force in the world. It's open and tolerant, and we know that free and just exchanges of views are very important for our society, and it's our humanist and enlightened values which run through our thinking. Climate neutrality and the digital transformation open new opportunities for our population. And it's precisely for these regions that we need to do all we can to use our instruments more cohesively. We need to be faithful to our values. We need to be realist and probably a little bit less naive as well, and be more just and virtuous in the world. Sovereignty, independence, emancipation, whatever the word it is we use, it's the substance which will count at the end of the day. Less dependence and more influence is the name of the game. Strategic autonomy in action is the credo which brings us together to help us define our shared destiny so that we can have a positive impact in the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. So unfortunately, we couldn't have an applause now after the speech, which we usually like to have when we do events with a real audience. But now we only have an online audience, so we look forward to getting the applause via various social media. But it was really a very inspiring speech that covered a lot of ground, and we have to try to unpack perhaps some of the points you made. For me, I think perhaps one of the most striking points that you made, and I would like you to perhaps explain and enlarge a bit more on that point, was about the decision-making process in the European Council. You very much defended the fact that unanimity helps us to carry everyone along and basically pull all countries. When all countries pull on the same string all together, then we are strong. Then we come with a unified position. Then we are all also together in the same boat and defend the same position. While qualified majority voting, which of course has been mentioned in the State of the Union speech of President von der Leyen, Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President. Is in your views perhaps not always a strength, but rather a sign of weakness. And I was wondering whether you could enlarge a little bit more on that point, because it is, I mean, I think one of the key questions, and many commentators, many think tankers would definitely think, well, at some stage, as we are progressing with political unity, as we have more debates among ourselves, we have to also come to a point where, you know, we take decisions by majority and not just by unanimity.
No, indeed. I think there is an important question. It's not easy to have the final answer, but I have the impression that very often, if we work more together before the European Council in order to try to prepare at the strategic level our debate, it's possible with the unanimity to take decisions. And of course, unanimity, it means sometimes a feeling of frustration, because it means that we need sometimes more time in order to be able to decide together. But I think that the unanimity is also the guarantee for all the member states to be involved in the process, to be involved in the European project. And my concern would be the following. Without unanimity, if we would decide to abandon this principle of unanimity, I don't exclude the feeling, the impression of some member states that they are not important in the European process. And maybe it can lead to some negative collateral effects. I don't have a final answer. I agree that we need to be able to react more quickly, but maybe there are some other tools that we can try to develop in order to react more quickly. But I think the interesting example with China the last months has demonstrated that it was possible with a very strong political preparation at the highest level to have a common approach, to take a common decision altogether. I remember that a few months ago, probably for many observers, the impression was about China, the EU, they are divided, the member states, they don't follow the same approach. And when we took the decision to go more into the substance, we observed that it was possible, because we worked a lot in the preparation, to have a common approach. And now I observed, for example, the last days at the level of the General Assembly of the UN, that all the member states, they have expressed the same approach about the future relationship with China.
So China, of course, a very, very important topic. You already mentioned also in your speech the very important summit a few weeks ago, where you very much emphasized the climate issues, but also human rights issues. And when it comes to the climate issue, your speech highlights that you attribute some of the announcement that China made for its 2060 targets to the clear EU position. So can you just give us a bit more of a flavor of what was really the debate, and on the climate front, what is it really that you demanded from China, and what was the quid pro quo here? But I mean, what was expected also from China? I mean, we all are committed to fulfilling Paris, but what was it that we achieved really from the European Union point of view?
I try not to be naive. I don't underestimate how it will be difficult in the next years to convince some partners in the world, and China included, to be totally committed in order to implement what we have decided in Paris. But the fact a few days ago that China announced the decision climate neutrality by 2060, it's a good step in the right direction. And who can imagine that without the role of the EU, it has been possible. It was possible for China to take such a decision, and it's one of the examples showing that we have a stronger influence than what we sometimes are thinking in Europe. And the fact that we have a clear vision for the future, the European Green Deal, climate neutrality by 2050. In the next weeks, it will be a difficult debate. We will discuss the goal for 2030. Very difficult and very complex debate with concrete consequences in all our member states. But the fact that we have a clear vision, what we want for the future, the fact at the same time that we consider that it's possible because of this climate change challenge to develop innovative technologies, I think that it makes us a stronger power in the world. And with China, our goal was very clear. It was important for us to convince China first that we want to engage with China, and second that we want to rebalance our relationship. And we consider that it's important also for China to be totally committed, to be more committed in order to reach the goals that we have decided in Paris.
Well, let's spend a bit more time on China because it's such an important topic before moving on. China, one of the central aims for a long time has been to come to an agreement on an investment relation, so reaching a bilateral investment treaty. That looks very far away at this stage. The German presidency wanted to seal the deal during the presidency. I think it has become clear that it will be very difficult. Why? Well, from a European point of view, because China does not allow reciprocity, does not give the same degree of market access, has a very strong role of the state in the economy, which distorts competition, which makes it very difficult to safeguard the level playing field for European companies. Now, that was a strong point with negotiating point of the EU for a very long time. Of course, now you say we are more united in our position on that, but still China didn't seem to move much. Or do I misinterpret this? I mean, how far can we push China on this point really of reciprocity and market access? And if we can't push them, what do we do? I mean, do we reduce our strategic relationship with China?
It's very clear that we are working very hard with the Commission and also with the member states in order to make progress, and we hope that it will be possible by the end of this year to reach an agreement on the investments agreement. I'm not certain that it will be the case, but we will work very hard because we think it's a priority. But when we prepared with the member states this last virtual summit with China a few weeks ago, we felt that it was very important for all the member states to be certain that in case of agreement, we need to make more progress on the level of level playing field and reciprocity. And there is no doubt we are in favor of a free economy. We are totally committed and engaged for an open world, for open societies. But at the same time, the question is, how is it possible to make more progress on the level of fairness? How is it possible to have fairer relationships, not only with China, but certainly with China?
Well, there's many topics I still want to touch on, but let me move perhaps back quickly to this issue of unanimity in the context of the neighborhood. You mentioned Belarus. You mentioned also the Eastern Mediterranean and our difficulties to come to clear and strong positions as regards Russia, Belarus. On Russia, we have for quite some time a unanimous agreement, but on Belarus, the debate is very long and very difficult, and some countries, I believe Cyprus, still negotiate and want to have some further concessions as regards the relations with Turkey. So is unanimity perhaps not, after all, slowing us down too much on some issues?
Well, I recognize that sometimes unanimity it means that it takes more time in order to decide. But Belarus is maybe not the right example. Why? Because on Belarus, immediately when we faced the difficult situation in the country after the presidential elections, we had a European Council in August, and by consensus we decided what will be and what would be our approach related to the situation in Belarus and in the region. But I recognize that the last days it was difficult to implement what we have decided in August. Is it a problem? Yes, it's a problem. And it means that we need to work very hard. It will be the case in the perspective of the next European Council by the end of the week. And I expect and I hope that we will implement what we have decided in August.
So you made a very strong point that we have really three strategic goals that we want to achieve with autonomie stratégique, so strategic autonomy, which is interestingly, by the way, the expression, it was first sovereignty, now it's autonomy. It's an interesting change in the word, and perhaps you want to say a word on that, because the German finance minister, for example, continues to use the word sovereignty. You use autonomy, which I think has quite a different connotation than sovereignty. So perhaps you want to say one word on this linguistic difference. But then you really highlight 3 points: stability, diffusion of promotion of our standards, and promotion of our values. And I was wondering if you would rank those three. Where are we most successful of those three, and where are we least successful? Are we most successful in stability, most successful in standards, or most successful in promoting our values?
Well, I will try to be very, very transparent. My impression is that we are very good when we work in order to promote our standards, and we made a lot of progress the last years. And we need to improve our capacity to have more influence and to be more efficient when we promote our values, and when we are working very hard in order to have more stability. Is it easy? Not. no, it's not easy. It's a difficult challenge. And maybe one word about this autonomy, sovereignty. I would like to repeat that I understand very well that the meanings of the words can be different in the different European countries. It's very important when we start this important political debate that we avoid having misunderstandings between us. That's why it was very important for me to focus more on the substance and to be less obsessed by the question of the words that we use. In any case, my impression is that we need, and we all agree on that, we need to work very hard in the future in order to be less dependent and to develop strong, open international relationships, but with more fairness in comparison with the current situation.
So when we talk about the issue of stability, you mentioned security as one dimension, and you mentioned very prominently supply chains, medical production, rare earths, microprocessors, and reducing our dependency on others. At the same time, you started off your speech saying autonomy is not protectionism. And I think this is, of course, a very, very difficult debate. And one of the first things I get asked whenever people ask me about the topic sovereignty or autonomy, they ask me, well, but doesn't that mean basically protectionism? Doesn't it mean you want to protect your own industry at the expense of foreign industries? And let's just take the example of medical supply. Europe is one of the world's leaders in medical exports. We export more high-tech medical goods than we import. Still, we are having a debate about reducing our import dependency, which could be a very risky strategy because our exports might actually suffer and we might actually be confronted with protectionism from others who reply to us, well, you protect, you don't want to import anymore our, I don't know, medication, our face masks, so we don't import your high-tech export goods. So is that really the right approach, and how do we make sure it doesn't become a protectionist?
I listen carefully to this observation, and indeed it would be a big mistake if we would open the way for more protectionism. It's exactly the contrary. We need an open economy, no hesitation, no doubt on that. But today, what's the current situation in many fields? We open our big single market for many companies coming from abroad, not necessarily the same standards in comparison with our businesses, with our companies. We discussed a few minutes ago about the situation with China. It's a very good example. When I meet European businesses, they tell us a lot, many experiences, concrete experiences, which demonstrates that the situation is not fair. And indeed, I think that we need, between the member states, a very serious debate on that in order to avoid making the mistake of protectionism. It would be crazy from the European perspective, but at the same time, I think we need to rebalance our relationships, especially at the trade level with some regions in the world.
You mentioned trade, so we have a question from the audience exactly about trade. The person is asking us, how do you see open strategic autonomy developing in the area of trade? What would you emphasize in the phrase open, strategic, or autonomy?
The three words. If we keep this expression, the three words would be important, of course.
Right. All three words are important. So let's still think a little bit more about the trade issue. I mean, one of the key and strong competences that the EU has is, of course, trade policy, because we have a commissioner dedicated to it, and the commissioner can actually do trade deals not just based on unanimity, but also based on QMV. How do you see our trade relation with major trading partners, especially the United States, developing in the coming years?
First of all, I think that we need to continue to be very committed in order to try to reform the World Trade Organization. And we are working with important partners like Japan, for example, but also with others in order to try to make some progress. But at the same time, we know that after the elections in the United States, we suppose that it will be possible to have a strong channel of dialogue with the United States in order to tackle those important topics. My observation is very pragmatic. I observed the last months, the last years, a choice in the United States regarding this trade issue, which was not always very friendly towards the European Union. I hope we will develop a good, a positive channel of dialogue, channel of communication, channel of negotiations. We made some small progress the last weeks, but of course it's important to develop a broader vision in order to see how is it possible to have a good, a strong, a sustainable relationship, also trade relationship with the United States, important ally for us. But we observed that with this new approach in the United States, America first, it means that it's also important for us not to choose a kind of protectionism, but it's important for us to defend our interest and to promote our values. And you see that the European standards are most of the time higher standards in comparison with other regions in the world.
Well, the United States, an important ally, China, a partner with whom to engage. But where do we stand in the conflict between China and the United States? Because irrespective of the next president, who's going to be the next president in the United States, the course that the United States has taken on China, the much tougher line, be it on technology, be it on market access issues, be it on many, many issues, I think that line will remain. I mean, the United States will have a very tough line. So what will we do as Europeans? Will we have to choose? Will we develop our own line? How will it go?
In my opinion, it's clear that it would be not acceptable for us to become a collateral victim of this conflict between China and the United States. That's why we need to identify what's our own path, what's our own way. And that's what we did during the last virtual summit with China, which explained point one, we want to engage with China because China is an important actor in order to tackle climate change, to face the consequences of COVID-19, to develop an approach more based on multilateralism, for example. On the other hand, on trade, I repeat that it's important for us to rebalance our relationship for more fairness, for more reciprocity, for more level playing field. And I think it would be a mistake if we would accept, as European Union, just to follow the approach proposed by the United States. I don't want to decouple with China or from China. We think that it's important to remain engaged with them. That's what we will do.
Well, I don't want to decouple from China, but the US, of course, may or may not, but they may push us in that direction. And as they do, it might become actually very, very difficult for the European Union to preserve its own line. And let's just take one example. I mean, we've had these conversations in the context of Iran and the Iran sanctions, where the United States was threatening and was imposing secondary sanctions on European firms. The United States is starting to think about these issues and to act in some spaces in the technology space when it comes to China. So, for example, technological companies that get targeted by U.S. authorities, and business with those technology companies is getting increasingly difficult. So, what are the counter instruments, or what is the scope for us really to avoid being pushed in that direction?
I think that we need to develop our own strategy because we have our own goals. Take, for example, the digital agenda. For us, because of our fundamental values, it's important that we develop a very strong ambition related to the digital agenda, taking into consideration the privacy, the freedoms, which, in my opinion, is an added value. And that's why we need to promote with China, with the United States, with other regions of the world, our European approach, point one. And point two, it's not possible for me to predict what will happen in the United States after the next elections in this country. But in any case, I hope after the elections in the United States that we will have a good, strong debate with the American authorities in order to work more together at the international level. I just observed the last months, the last years, that it was not so easy for the EU to keep a permanent channel of dialogue, of negotiation with our very important ally, the United States. We will see what will be possible, but in any case, we consider as EU that we need to follow this approach with China that we have developed together, which is clear. This is a clear choice. We have our European values. We promote our values. We don't hesitate to tackle this question of Hong Kong, the way the minorities are not respected in some regions in China, and we don't hesitate to explain to the Chinese authorities that we are ready to continue to engage with them at the trade level, for example, but that it's important for us to rebalance this relationship. And I hope that in the next months, by the end of the year, I'm not certain, but I hope that it will be possible to deliver. And why is it important to be clear and to be united? Because for China, if we are clear, if we speak with a clear voice, and if we are united, then we are in a better position in order to defend our common interests.
So would we be ready to use our unity to defend some of our values in a strong way, for example, when it comes to minority rights in China?
I give one example. I was very clear during this virtual summit, and we explained it for us. It was very important to send European teams or even UN teams in the regions in order to have a political dialogue about the different topics, human rights included. This message is a very clear message, and I think that we need to be proud of our European values. Last week we had the General Assembly, the virtual General Assembly of the UN, but also the values of the UN are based on the dignity, are based on the human rights, and that's why we promote this approach.
So one person here on Slido, and please join us on Slido for more questions, is asking the question about the international role of the euro. There was a big push back in 2018-19 to promote the international role of the euro. That was in the wake of Iran, very much in the wake of pressure on financial and monetary institutions to engage in any business with Iran, which in the end undermined our ability really to continue doing business and fulfilling our part of the deal with Iran. That sort of discussion has quieted down a little bit. You mentioned it in your speech now quite prominently again. We have, of course, created a major safe asset, or we are about to create it with the EU bonds in the next generation EU. But how do you see this going forward, and how strongly do you want to promote the international role of the euro?
Very quickly after my appointment, I made this statement because I think indeed after the experience related to the situation in Iran and the American decision regarding the JCPOA, it was the clear demonstration that we need to strengthen the international role of the euro. And what we have decided in July, this is certainly a very strong step in order to make this eurozone very strong, very credible. This is a strong signal that we send sent to the rest of the world. Point one, but of course, we need to continue to work. It's not easy on some other important topics like the banking union, like the capital markets union, and with the new president of the Eurozone, we will work very closely in order to prepare the next Euro Summit at the level of the European Council. But there are also some interesting topics that maybe we need to tackle in the future. The fact that the tools, the payment tools, the payment means are located outside of Europe. Maybe we need also to think about the possibility as EU to develop our own stronger strategy on this topic.
Let's talk a bit about Russia. We have a question from someone in the audience who argues that the EU is fully dependent on importing natural gas and oil from Russia, which is politically used by Moscow. What is the EU doing to end this unhealthy connection?
Yes, I recognize that the relationship with Russia is difficult, is sensitive, and there are different sensitivities in Europe, and certainly we have different topics related to the relationship with Russia. Energy is an important topic, but also security. What about the economic development? We know that we have decided sanctions against Russia. I intend, like we did for China, like we are doing for the Eastern Mediterranean, I intend in the next months to open a strategic debate at the level of the European Council on Russia, because I think indeed that it will be important to have a common vision, to have a common goals, to be very, very clear, and we are very clear. We need to be respected. All our member states in Europe need to be respected, and we will not avoid having in the next months a serious debate on the future of our relationship with this part of the world.
So should we end Nord Stream 2?
You know that this Nord Stream 2 question is very controversial in Europe. It's not a surprise, but at the same time, I think that at the level of the European Council, it's possible to discuss the different difficult questions between us. And when it comes to Russia, I suppose that some member states will tackle this topic as well.
So there are many questions in different directions coming here in our feed. So please join the feed if you have a last question. I can ask one or two more questions, but I really see two more questions that I find stand out. One is on this, and since you mentioned the Euro Summit and the promotion of the international role of the Euro, is the question of a sort of Eurozone or EU finance minister. And someone wants to hear what in the audience wants to hear whether we should reopen that debate or whether that debate has already been settled and the EU finance minister as our commissioner for budget, or how do you see that position going forward?
Well, I have the impression that with a good and a strong cooperation between the Commission and the president of the Euro Group, it's possible to make progress. And I have the impression that the priority in the next month should be the banking union and the capital market union. I think it's very concrete, and it would have more effect, I think, that the possible appointment of one more European personality.
Okay, so perhaps the last question I really want to ask is about, since we discussed also trade issues quite a lot, is about the thorny and very important issue of carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is asked here by a person in the audience. He or she wants to hear what's your view on the impact on developing countries. Perhaps what I would add is what is your view also on this mechanism with the United States? It seems to me that a possible Biden president has already made strong statements about climate policy and about being a priority, and about, of course, also the need to have some sort of an external adjustment mechanism, carbon border adjustment mechanism. Would that be a transatlantic agenda also, to really work on carbon border adjustment and a transatlantic trade relation together with the United States, have a joint?
I think this is a very essential debate that we will have in the next months, in the next years. This is also a difficult debate because we know that there are many legal concerns, especially the possibility for the World Trade Organization to consider that it would be in line with the regulation, the international regulation. And I know also when it comes to the economic sectors in Europe that there are different opinions on that, because the devil can be in the details, and based on the possible modalities, this good idea can be efficient or not really efficient, and can be also counterproductive. But at the same time, I am personally convinced that we need to make progress on this topic with the European Parliament, with the Council, with the Commission. We will see what will be the proposals that the Commission will put on the table on that. It will be an interesting basis indeed in order to nourish the political dialogue with our ally in the United States, but also with other regions in the world, other countries in the world, like China, for example. But I would like to be clear, the carbon measure adjustment should be in link with our ETS system, and we need to tackle at the same time, in parallel, this possible reform with an improvement of our ETS system. And our ETS system can also be a basis, an inspiration for other regions in the world, for other countries in the world, in order to implement such a strategy, in order to be certain that we make progress regarding the question of climate change. And I can imagine that with China, for example, in the future, it can, or with India in the future, it can be a very interesting and important topic that we need to tackle together.
Well, indeed, the emission trading system is at the core of the European efforts for climate change, and is a big topic also in many other countries. Since you mentioned India, if you allow me one last short question on India, because we've discussed Russia, we've discussed the United States, we've discussed China, we've discussed the neighborhood, but we haven't discussed India and our strategic approach to India. Can you say just one word?
I consider that India is a very important partner for many reasons in this part of the world. That's why we will have a summit next year with India. It was important for me not only to be engaged with China, but it was important for me also to give a clear signal that India is an important partner in many fields. We are working in preparation of this summit, and I'm confident. I have the impression, especially at the level of the digital agenda and the question of the data, that we have many topics that we need to discuss with China in order to try to develop more common approach with this country, which will play, for obvious reasons, also for demographic reasons, a very important role in the next decade.
Mr. President, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for this very fruitful debate and the great exchange of ideas. I think it was a pleasure, and our audience was very engaged. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you.